Okay, it's the end of the session. I am here without, because they're in the other room entertaining. This has been a longer session than I normally do. But this is Rio and Luca's roadmap to success. Now, what we did, we just got done doing it with meeting a new person, and it went great. He didn't bark at all. So let's just talk about that. So when people come into your home that Luca doesn't know, he looks at them as invading his space, and because he can't leave of his own free will, he is trapped and cornered. That's eventually kind of a version of flooding. So what I would recommend, the first time or two that you meet people, do what we just did outside. So leave a little bit of a treat trail. Have the person seated. So when the dog approaches, we want the dog approaching like from about their 5 o'clock or their 7 o'clock mark. And the person should not look at them. No big movements, no talking. You can talk, but any those other things are going to cause them to act out. So basically the dog comes up to the treat trail, and then what you're going to do is when Luca looks at, if you're one of the guests who's going to watch this, so I just toss a treat, and I usually toss the first treat slightly behind the dog. We have a tendency to only put the treat between us and the dog because we want the dog to get close to us. We want the dog to want to get close to us. So what we're doing is when you look at me, I say yes. Is a marker word, and we throw a treat. We're saying yes when the dog looks at us, and then I throw a treat behind you or to the side. The dog has to move away and get the treat. But then the treats are coming from here. So it kind of creates a drawing in. The dog wants to come to the person as opposed to us luring the dog. We still have the treats, but it's a different dynamic. It's an important distinction. So you want to do that a couple times, and you're going to toss 3 to 5 treats and make sure they're really good treats. The treats I was using are Tricky Trainer's soft and chewy chicken liver. That's what I used throughout the session. At the end, I was using Stewart's freeze-dried beef liver. If you use Stewart's, make sure you get a serrated edge knife and chop them into little pieces smaller than a pea. It's very rich. You should not give too many of those treats. You can cause them to get pancreatitis because it's so nutrient dense. But for meeting a guest, that might be a good thing for them to actually, the guest to have. Now the guest comes over, I get the best treats I've ever had. I don't get the treats like that from anybody else except for from strangers. So again, we're creating a positive emotional response. So basically, when the dog's going to approach the guest who's seated, and before the dog comes up, and you're going to talk. Ideally, we like him eating a couple treats out of our hand before we get up. So if he won't take the treat out of your hand, which eventually he should do, then the guest just throws a treat to the side. The dog goes and licks the treat, looks back, yes, and then I toss a treat over here, yes, yes. So I'm yesing when the dog looks at the person, and then that causes me to throw a treat, which distracts. So they're looking at you for a fraction of a second. And you can throw the treats a little bit behind you, but if you see the dogs get stiff or twitchy, throw the treat behind him. Just don't throw it too far away so he can't find it in the grass. You want to do this for 3 to 12, 15 treats or so. Then I'm going to have whoever the handler is take, and you'd probably be best to do this with only with Luca. Have Rio around, but not participating in this because it just adds extra stuff. And again, be aware of your environment. If there's a baby crying, a car peeling out, or a truck beeping or whatever, those things are going to add extra elements we don't need to deal with. So wait for those to pass. So, all right, so we've, the dogs come up, we've tossed some treats. Now the dog's looking at us and we're tossing the treats. After doing that about 5 or 7 times, then I might hold the treat out. Now, if I hold the treat to the dog like this, front facing is confrontational. So I'd like to hold the treat out like this at dog's nose level or lower. And the lower you go, the more it's gonna bring it in for the dog. So if you hold it here and the dog's gonna go for it, you'll start noticing if you go down, then Luca might come over to take it. We'd like Luca to take one off your hand. It's not required, but that's a nice indicator he feels comfortable. Then once he's taken a treat or 2 out of your hand, ask him for a sit. If he doesn't sit, only ask once. If he doesn't sit, that's okay. Don't ask for it multiple times. The sit, if he sits, is an indication he's comfortable. If he doesn't want to sit, it's an indication he's still not comfortable, which is going to be very normal. So when we want to have the guest stand up, we don't want the dog nearby. So whoever the handler is going to call the dog away, preferably the dog's looking away. The guest stands up and stays in the same position. Then we lead the dog back up, and we're recreating things, but we're doing it from a standing position instead of a seated position. Then I would have somebody hand Rio's leash to the guest, and then all of you guys walk maybe to the end of the block and back. Doesn't have to be a super long walk. So when we're walking, we'd like person, dog, dog, person, or the dog's going to be on the inside, outside, it doesn't matter. But I just want everybody in a straight line here. I don't want one person in front, one person behind. I want everybody together. Walk to 3 or 4 houses or the end of the block, turn around and walk back. When we came inside, as soon as we're outside the door, the guest gave Luca a treat. Walked in the door, gave him another treat. Going through doors is hard. That's a transition. We go from the outside to the inside. Less distractions. We want to carry over that momentum. So, and then as you're coming up the stairway, every once in a while, if you think he's a little bit uncomfortable, just give him a treat. Nothing wrong with free treating a fearful dog. When you get to your door, then I would have the door open, have the guest closer to the door. The guest turns around and gives Luca a treat. The guest opens the door, steps inside, gives Luca another treat. Then Luca and the handler come in, and then we close the door, and then they gives another treat to Luca. So we're kind of transitioning in. We come in, the person should sit down, and if Luca comes up, don't pet. Don't look at him, don't move. If he comes up to sniff you, especially if he's got his leg way back here, that means he's really mustering up the courage to come and do it. He's afraid. Petting him, although we think is a positive thing, is going to be the worst thing. Not the worst, but not a great thing. So let him sniff you, and don't move. And eventually, if when he walks away, then you can pull out a treat and ask him to come over, ask him to sit. If you ask him to sit and he takes a couple feet away, he's saying, I'm comfortable enough to sit, but I need a couple feet away from you. That's okay. We're making progress. Now, the guest is here. We'd ideally like to keep the guest here for a short period of time, not overly long. The longer the guest is here, it's easy for the dog to get irritable. So it'd be ideal if you have somebody coming to pick you up, have them park their car, come up and recreate this incident. And do it with neighbors in the building if you have any. So we want to have them come in for a short period of time, and then they leave before the dog gets agitated. What we're trying to do is create a scenario where I meet a new person, I have a positive emotional response, I feel good about them, they come into my house, I continue having a positive emotional response that carries over to my house, and after hanging out for a little bit, get some treats, that person leaves. And I don't bark at all. And after a while, I like it when the person comes because they have the Stewart's Freeze-Dried Beef, they have the better treats. And they're not trying to pet me or do anything. Now, eventually, yeah, when he feels comfortable, you just hold your hand out like this, palm facing you, facing the dog at about nose level. If the dog turns his head to the side, that's a cutoff signal. He's saying, I don't want you to pet me. If you respect that, that will make him more comfortable down the ride. But you go to try to pet him, because that's what we want to do, and he doesn't like that. If we don't think we don't want some random person coming up and giving us a hug. That's kind of what petting a dog you don't know is like if the dog is uncomfortable. So eventually it'd be nice to ask the person to ask to sit, and the dog's listening, and we saw in there that worked out pretty well. So I think if you do that once or twice, you probably will only have to do it once or twice for each new guest, and you might get to a tipping point after like 8 guests, 10 guests. He feels more comfortable. Then you can try having somebody come in your house, but it doesn't do well, just go back to doing this. I call this a treat trail. Okay, let me see. When we did the session, we went over marker words. I have a video on marker words, so remember to load the marker word. So yes, treat, take a couple steps, yes, treat, take a couple steps, yes, treat. Walk around your house. I would have you do this. J-Man does that. You want to do this in a day or two. By the time you've seen this, you should have done this about 6 times with the clicker and 6 times with your yes. Remember, yes and the clicker are the same thing. So don't say click and yes. Either click or yes. Now, the clicker's better, but only if you have it in your hand, you can click with good timing. Remember, you need to click or say yes within a maximum of 2 seconds. Maximum is the last. The goal is to click or say yes the instant the dog does it or slightly after, unless it has something like duration. Because the dogs have had some potty issues outside, I would reward them outside. When they're about to pee, say whatever your pee-pee or whatever the word is. When you can anticipate. Don't say pee-pee, 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 pee-pee. The more you say it, the less you mean it. Don't repeat a word. If you don't know when it is, just watch your dog. So many people will videotape the dog so they see the mannerisms their dogs go through before eliminating. So you knows, before he does it, he saddles this way, saddles that way, his ears do this, and then he lifts up his leg. So you see saddle 1, saddle 2, ears do this. You say pee-pee, he lifts his leg and peeps. Remember, you want the cue to come before the action. And then afterwards, you say yes and give a treat. We want him, both dogs thinking this urine and feces stuff is valuable. If I put it out there, I get a treat. So they'll let you know, they'll process, scratch the door. They want to go outside and go potty so you can treat them. If they make an accident in the house, just clean it up. Don't point it out to them. Don't talk to them. Don't tell them bad dog. Studies have shown that it'll just make it harder. The best thing to do is just reward them when they're outside. And you're saying that word beforehand. Now, if you said, go make a pee-pee, go make a pee-pee, 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 if you said that a whole bunch, you might come up with a new word like business, potty, deposit, whatever you want to say. Sometimes we use a word too much and it creates an issue. Speaking of words, the Guardians here saw a different trainer years ago before me. And one of the things they do, I think, every time the dog makes a mistake. I don't like doing that. I don't like when people point out my mistakes. Now, if I have employees, I point out their mistakes in a way for them to learn from the mistake and move better. And that's different than somebody constantly pointing out all the mistakes you make. So I don't want to do that. I'd rather focus my energy and my efforts on rewarding the positive elements. So that's why we went over celebrating. Now, before we did celebrating, I forgot we went over hand targeting. I have a video for that one as well. Practice the hand targeting, because now when we have a guest like we have in the other room, like right now, we can play the hand targeting. You and Jay can play hand targeting back and forth. And then maybe after the dog is doing it back and forth, then your guest does it. And he comes over and your dog is choosing to go to the guest, touches his nose with their hand, and be rewarded for doing so. And the guest is not petting me or approaching me. That's another nice reason to do that exercise. It is a bit of a consent game. You can also use it to reposition. That's what it's designed for. So if you want Rio to look that direction, he's looking over here, you put your hand here and go touch, and you lure him around. You can also use an alternative recall. I have a video for that one. If you forgot how to do that, let me know. All right, so we also went over what I started talking about, celebrating and what I call dog manners. Celebrating is rewarding the dog when it chooses to do a behavior that you find desirable without you asking for it. So your dog comes to you, yes, and pet him. They sit down, yes, and they pet him. They lay down, yes, and they pet him. They drink their water, they drop a ball. Anything that's desirable. I taught my dog to stretch this way, to drink. When I say happy hour, they go drink water, because I use this principle. The dog went over and drank water. When I got done, I said yes. And when I anticipated the dog was going to the water, I said, happy hour. The dog was going to drink the water no matter what. It drinks water. I say yes at the conclusion of it, and I give it a treat. Now I can say happy hour. My dog goes, drinks water to go over and coming back and get a treat from me. So it's a nice little thing to add in there. So that's, and say celebrate to each other. So if I'm standing here and one of the dogs walks up to me and sits down and I didn't see it because I'm watching TV, somebody says celebrate, I say yes, and I pet the dog under the chin. I don't need to know what it is. So help each other out till you get the myelin sheath of the neural pathways going, and the dog's more likely to do that behavior. Now, the flip side of that is what I call manners. Manners I accomplish through what I call the do-over concept. Just like a child who tells his mom, Mom, I don't want this meatloaf, go make me some chicken nuggets. Mom says, would you like to ask for the chicken nuggets again? Mommy, can I please have some chicken nuggets? The mom makes it. Yeah, go make some chicken nuggets. Mom just goes back to what she was doing. Remember, half of how dogs learn is not being rewarded when they don't do the thing that we want. So we don't punish, just nothing happens. So if I sit, I hear yes and I get a treat. If I just stand there and look at you, or if I bark, you don't even look at me. Barking does not work. I know it's hard, especially when we live in an apartment when dog's barking, but the best thing to do when a dog barks is act like you don't hear it. It doesn't get any response from you. Now, we can also do things like exercising our dogs, providing with something to chew or lick or things along those lines. For Luca, he's sound sensitive. He's got cortisol. He's nervous. And every time he hears sounds outside that spikes cortisol in his blood, he probably is close to getting a PTSD scenario, which is being in that overly aroused state for too long. It takes dogs up to 3 days of being completely calm for the cortisol to dissipate out of their blood. So if I'm constantly triggered every day, multiple times a day, I can never get back to balance. And that can create some psychological issues, as the guardian here knows better than I do. So just be cognizant of that. Indications of cortisol for the dogs is blood is what we call efficiency of movement. Jittery, snapping their head around. I like to, this is my own word, I call it fidelity of movement. So a dog doesn't have cortisol. Just going to check out, look at everything. You're stopping and smelling the roses. So twitchiness, indication of cortisol. All right, so the exercise that we did in the video above will go over how to help with that sound sensitivity, and that makes the dog feel more secure and comfortable and confident when the thing that I'm afraid of, I get over my fear. So I no longer have that thing debilitating me or making me feel insecure or uncomfortable or spiking those cortisol levels. All right, so for manners, I'm jumping around a little bit. Celebrate is rewarding the dog when they choose to do something you like. Manners is when the dog comes up and nudges you with its nose, paws at you, barks at you. Go make me some chicken nuggets is essentially what the dog is doing. When it does that, you give it the do-over concept by asking it for a sit or a down, provided they know how to sit or down on cue. So if your dog has a sit but not a down, then you just ask for the sit. I ask for it one time. Playing hard to get works great for dating. It works great for dog training. So I say sit and the dog doesn't sit. I just lean back, go back to writing a song, making some art, making cookies, kissing my partner, whatever it is. So I told you, I wanted you to make the number one. All you had to do is sit. And if you choose not to sit, that's totally cool, dog. You do whatever you want. But I'm now on to the next thing. The dog is not being reinforced. So the dog's going to start learning that barking or jumping or nudging or demanding doesn't work. But sitting sure does, because they celebrate the heck out of my sits. And after a while, the dog will start coming and sitting in front of you to prepay for attention, and bet your butt when he does, you better pet him. Say your marker word, then pet him. Now, if they do it again and again and again, they're probably saying, I'm bored. Take me for a walk. Give me an adventure. Do something along those lines. So I think you do a good job of exercising your dogs, but if they're especially needing and over and asking for it, then take them out for a short walk or do a little training. Also a great way to drain energy is train them to do like the bucket game. Drains a lot of energy, very easy to go through. I have a video on the bucket game, but I don't have it linked up above. Message me and I'll show you how to do that. I would recommend you do that for one meal for each dog until you can get all the way 5 passes, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then you're putting the food on the floor. When you get to the point where you put the bowl and the food on the floor, the dog's gonna probably, if you do it right, the dog's gonna be waiting. Then you tap the bowl as you say whatever the cue is. So sushi, the dog runs over and eats his food. We get done, you say yes. After enough repetition, sushi means I get to go eat my food. The other dog, maybe its word is meatloaf, haggis, meatball, whatever you want to say. So now each dog has its own word to eat. Now, teaching the dogs to wait to eat is challenging. I'm happy to help you with that. If you can achieve that, great. But if you just want to feed them in the other rooms, that's fine. But the bucket game will help them learn not to go rush towards each other. And that's a wonderful way to develop a little impulse control. The watchword I use for getting back to the manners lesson is manners. And so if somebody comes in and the dog is jumping up on me, I'm absent-mindedly petting the dog while I'm watching TV, and somebody says manners, what they're saying is, David, I think you might have forgotten to ask the dog to do something. It's asking for attention in a way that's probably not as polite as it could be. So if I'm petting the dog, somebody says manners, I stop petting the dog, say sit. If the dog sits, I say yes and pet it under his chin. And then I turn and tell my partner, hey, I knew what I was doing, but thank you for reminding me because I do forget at times. Don't argue about it. Just go through the lesson. It's great repetition. Dog training and body language and behavior modification is a numbers game. The more you do it, the easier, the more likely it is for them to do it again. So even if you're doing it right, it's just a good practice. So and remember, when people say celebrate or manners, immediately go to the action. Don't, you're always on me about that. We're just trying to help each other remember. Okay, we also went over the importance of, dog consent. So these dogs have a pretty, Rio's was not as pronounced, and I worry that it might be that there's something called learned helplessness, which I don't think either dog is near. But learned helplessness is kind of something I experienced at one point where everything is going so bad, I just have no more hope anymore. I just lose my everything. I'm just sitting there and just despondent. And so that's a horrible thing. You don't want to see a dog like that. But I wonder if he's a little bit, if Luca's feeling a little bit powerless in certain situations. So we went over, and that might be why he's not giving good cutoff signals. You don't feel comfortable giving cutoff signals. So I have a video for that. But remember, cutoff signals for dogs are ducking the head, looking up there, turning away, ears flipping back, harder to see on cockers, or kind of a combination of all those things. So that's the dog's way of saying no. They could also lick their lips. They could bare their teeth. That's a pretty obvious cutoff signal. Growling, as Luca was doing when he was chewing a bone and Rio was walking around. Growling or baring the teeth, I interpret that as the dog's way of saying no, I disagree, or I feel uncomfortable. If you don't feel comfortable about something and you tell your partner I don't feel comfortable and they tell you to be quiet, that is not going to help you feel more comfortable. Dogs are the same thing. If your dog's overreacting, the best thing you can do is increase the distance between them and whatever they're reactive to. That can be by you leading that dog away or taking the thing away. Either one accomplishes it. Okay, let me see. So for cutoff signals, some other cutoff signals, dog might refuse to look at you through the side eye. We call it side eye. Dog world, we call it whale eye. They might walk away from you. They might just refuse to listen. We often misinterpret this as a disobedience. These are smaller dogs, not tiny, but a lot of the small dogs, they freeze. And we go over and pick them up and we think that freezing is consent. It's not. I always want the dog to do things. Something I didn't go over in the session, but one thing I do is a consent check. So I'm petting the dog and I'm wondering if maybe the dog is done with the pets. I hold my hand over here and I go like this. If the dog comes back over to me, they're saying, yeah, I want some more pets. But I'm petting here, I stop and go like this and invite the dog, and it doesn't, it's saying I'm good. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your dog is allowed to say, I don't want you to pet me, even though it loves you. We have partners. We don't always want our partner to touch us. Dogs, same way. So if we wait for the dog's willingness to do something and their consent, then we know that they're on board. And that's one of the reasons I went over hand targeting, because again, that's a little bit of a consent check. So now after doing the petting on top of the head, and the petting on top of the head is really when you initiate the contact on top of the head. Dogs to dominate each other, one of the ways they do is putting their paw on top of the head. You can be petting your dog and work your way up, that's fine. But if you initiate the contact, that usually is something dogs don't like, they consider it dominating. And so what I like to do instead, if somebody wants to meet my dog, is I just say, yeah, we just like to hold your hand out and see if they want to meet you first. How are they going to tell us? Well, they'll touch your nose to your hand if they want to meet you. What if they don't touch my nose to your hand? And they're saying, I don't want to meet you. And we're going to ask you to please respect what they're saying. It's an elaborate conversation to have with somebody. Can I meet your dog? Yeah, we just ask people to hold their hand out so they can sniff it first. Okay, he's not sniffing me. Yeah, it's been a tough day. We had a lot of stuff going on. Well, we see you in the neighborhood. We'll see. Get you next time, and we'll take off. If you really want them to meet, you have your treat pouch with you. Hopefully, you have some of the Stewart's freeze-dried beef liver. You can have that person kind of toss a couple treats and maybe offer one. But again, have them try not to offer it like this. Front-facing is confrontational. So your dog already doesn't want to meet somebody. Have them turn sideways and offer the treat to their side and lower. Make sure it's low, dog's nose level or lower. And if the dog's looking at you, the lower your hand goes, the more motivating that is to the dog to come to you. So what we're going to do is give a couple of treats, and maybe that'll warm him up. But I would probably recommend, if you're meeting people, you want to meet somebody, let them meet Rio. If they want to meet Luca, yeah, he's not really a people dog. He's just not a big fan. He's kind of fearful. He has stranger danger. And if they demand to pet him, step in between. I know he goes behind you. Don't be afraid to step in between. The more that Luca sees that you are providing him with an environment that he feels safe and secure in, the less he needs to react. So now, let me see. So I guess I forgot to go over. The best place to pet a dog is here, 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 really anywhere in this oval region. The dogs kind of had a little minor cutoff signal here, but they seem to really like it on the chest. They might like it on the shoulders too. So if somebody wants to pet your dog, you say, hey, we just have to go hold your hand out, and the dog nudges them, just say, hey, he likes it on his chest. Otherwise, they'll go straight on top of the dog's head. A lot of dogs develop a nipping behavior because people are constantly petting on top of their head, but they say they don't want to be petted that place or that way. So the more that you create a scenario where everybody pets the dog in a way that is comfortable and calming for the dog, the more secure and confident they're going to be. And again, always take note of what's going on in the environment. Is there a baby screaming, a construction site, a hammer, somebody breaking something, kids yelling? If those things are happening, don't add more to it. Just meet them another day. Okay, we also went over a little bit of dog body language. I didn't do this as well as I'd like, so I'm going to go over it here for you. So dogs are normally wiggly and jiggly. So if dog's wiggly and jiggly and suddenly gets stiff and still, that's a big warning. Most of us wait until our dogs are bombastically reactive and we think that is the first sign. That's actually probably sign number 10 or 12 or 15. So when I'm reading dog body language, first I look at their head. Is their nose up? Is it down? Are their ears forward, to the side, or back? You want to kind of read your dog's body language when you're at home and just relaxed and comfortable. Where do your dog's ears sit? Where do they keep their nose elevation? How are they breathing? I look at those things. How are they? The eyes. Big open eyes is not a good thing. Hard staring eyes is not a good thing in the dog world. Sleepy eyes, closed, squinty eyes, that is a good thing. Just neutral eyes are fine as well. So I look at the head. Then I look at the tail. Most people think the tail means the dog wagging the dog. That means the dog is happy. The tail wagging is more of an indication of the dog's energy level. It's more like the tachometer in your car than it is the whether you're turning right or left. Not the best analogy. So basically, what we want to do is recognize where and how the tail is wagging. Usually, if it's straight up, just trying to think for these guys. Every dog has different tails. Some dogs have a curly tail, some are a fluffy tail. I'm just trying to think. For some reason, I can't picture their tails in my head. It's been a very long day. But you want to look at what the tail is doing for normal dog tails when they're relaxed. Normally, if this is the spine and the dog's head is here and this arm is the tail, we'd like to see that wagging in the middle. The higher it is, the more alerting it is. The lower it is, especially if it's tucked, not lower is bad. If it's tucked and they're trying to cover their anus, that I wouldn't have another dog meet or people meet. They have, short, stubby tails, so it's harder for you to see. But if you see that tail up a little bit, this nub, then they could be alerting. So it's a little bit harder on docked tails, which is why I'm not a big fan of docking tails. But basically, if you see it go back side to side, in the middle, they're probably feeling better. So also, is the dog leaning towards something or leaning away? Don't lean away. If the dog's leaning forward towards something or they're leaning away, they're indicating they're uncomfortable in one shape or one way or the other. So what we want to do is just make sure that you can see if my dog's leaning away from somebody, that's probably not somebody you want to have meet them. And then is the dog breathing heavy or holding its breath? Either one would be a sign of anxiety. Also going from an open mouth to a closed mouth. Now, a dog can just have a closed mouth, but the dog is like, that is a really big warning. I closed my mouth, I got still, my eyes got big, I lowered my head, and I stared. That's like 5 or 6 warnings. So the more that you can read your dog's body language, the more you can get them out of those situations. So you want to look for all these characteristics I just got done talking about in the house when the dog feels comfortable and relaxed and there's no stimulus. Then when somebody comes over and they're excited and happy, how are those things different? When somebody comes over and they're fearful, how are those things different? When we learn to read our dog's body language, we can tell, ooh, he's uncomfortable, his ears are doing this and this, and we make the person leave. Or we call the dog away, or whatever the case may be. The dog doesn't have to manage the situation. You're creating a safe situation for them. So learn to be an expert at reading your dog's body language. I'd also like the guardian to practice some self-restraint exercise. We went over the bucket game. So I have a video for that one. I would do that, I think I already talked about this, but 1 meal a day until you can get all the way down to the floor. But there's other exercises that you can do. Let me see, what else we go over? Go to the dog bed. So every time the dog jumps up on the couch, I throw a treat on the dog bed. Now, teaching the dog to go to the dog bed is simply like I show the dog I have a treat. Don't throw it over their head. If the dog's bed is this pillow, and I'm not going to go like this because the dog's going to look up and not find it. If I want to turn and get the dog to go to the dog bed, I touch a treat to their lips, I turn them, and then when they're looking at it, then I throw it. It lands on the bed. As soon as the dog steps on the bed, I say my marker word, and then they look up the treat. Now, we also should assign a name. We were saying, I think, Maui. So what I would do is I would touch the treat to the dog's lips, turn it around so it's looking at the deal, say Maui, then toss the treat. The dog steps on the bed, we say yes, then they lick up the treat. And I would do this for maybe 10 or 15 treats in a row, and maybe two different practice sessions. Then after that, I'm going to do 4 in a row. And the 5th one, I'm just going to say Maui and point. If he goes there on his own the first time or two, Maui, and he goes and sits down, yes, treat, 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 treat. We call this a jackpot for something that's difficult or substantial. And I want to go on, what did I just do? I just got a whole bunch of treats, and I remember how to do that again. So so after a while, you should be able to transition and say Malibu, he goes to Malibu, or Maui, sorry, and then you say yes, and then you give him the treat. So first we throw the treat to get him to go there, then we tell him to go there once he's good at it, and then we give him the treat. Remember, we don't want to say the cue unless we are 90% certain the dog's going to do the action. And most of the time what we do is we warm the dog up by having them practice the same exercise over and over and over again with the lure or emotion till they're doing it easily. Then we sneak the cue in before we do the emotion. So I'd also like the guardian to practice some premax and some structure. So he likes to, dogs like to be on the bed, or they like to be petted, or whatever it is. If the dog's nudging you, or you, let's say you're going to go out for a walk. Before you put the leash on, tell the dog to sit. When it sits, then reach and grab the collar and go and attach to the dog. Dog gets up, go to the door and say sit. If it sits, then you open the door and go outside. If it doesn't sit, drop the leash and go sit back down. Wait 1 minute. After 1 minute, go back to the door and tell the dog sit. If it sits within 2 seconds of the first and only time you say it, then you open the door, yes, and we go on a walk. Doesn't sit, then I drop the leash and walk away, and this time I sit down for 2 minutes. Next time I sit down for 4 minutes, 8 minutes. I keep doubling the length of time. I'm doing the place where I feel most comfortable, my house. You can do this on walks, like I make dogs sit every time we cross the street, but the problem is if you say sit, the dog doesn't sit, and you're on a walk, you got to sit there with them. So you can do this, the Premac principle, for anything that doesn't require food, but you could even do a little bit of it for feeding. So sit, they sit, and then I prepare the food. Sit, and then I grab the collar or the harness. Also, I would get a harness for Luca. Make sure it's an X or Y shape in the front. Just search for X or Y shape harnesses on Amazon. You know, get the ones that vest as well. You can. What we don't want is one that's like, it looks like a T-bar, a straight line going here. Those are kind of hard on dog's anatomy. Obviously, we don't want to use a prong collar or any sort of punishment-based tool. Let me see. So what else? The more the dog sees you telling it what to do, it feels a bit more secure in your leadership. And if you feel confident and secure in your leadership, you can kind of let other things go and assume that they're going to handle that for you. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is the dog to feel comfortable and confident in my human's leadership. All right, let me see. For the feeding, I already covered all that stuff. I think that's just about it. We also went over mental enrichment. So we didn't go through this as much, but you might want to Google scent games. There's a lot of games that you can do with the dog's nose where it has to look for treats in the house or solve puzzles or whatever. If it's using its nose, it's using a lot of its brain. It's a great way to drain energy. Also, before you meet guests, giving the dog some exercise followed by 10 minutes of rest can help Luca feel more comfortable. He doesn't have all this pent-up extra energy to be combative and bombastic. Use your gut. Luca needs to feel comfortable. You don't think that he feels comfortable? We have instincts for a reason. Stop. Move him away. Find a way to make it easier. What I do is I put things into small slices and make those slices as small and as easy as I can. And when the dog can do slice A over and over easily, then I add slice B, slice C. So we think going and open the door is one thing. We can walk to the door, that's one step. We can reach for the handle, that's 2 steps. We can touch the handle, 3 steps. We can turn the handle, jiggle, 4 steps. We can open the door, 5 steps. We can do the same thing with the deadbolt. So we can break things down into small steps. So ask yourself, if your dog has a difficulty with it, how can I break it down into small steps and make it easier for the dog? All right, what I'd recommend you do is watch this video specifically. Oh, we also forgot, we went over the kissing thing. Same principle. So we turn to each other, we pull away, yes, and the dog gets a treat. Then we turn to each other, reach a little bit, pull away, the dog's get a treat. Reach, and then we touch each other and pull away. Eventually we're leaning towards, eventually we're kissing for 1 second. Remember, the growling or the barking means we went too big. So back up to the previous step or the step before that, practice that one a couple times, and then move a half step in between that and the next step. Go at your dog's pace, and eventually you'll get there. The idea is, again, extinguish things and watch out for that extinguish burst like we talked about earlier. Okay, so watch this video once a week until when you watch this video, there's nothing new. I'm doing everything here. And if you're still having problems, let me know. I know you wanted to work on a loose leash walk, and we can set that up and work on that separately. But if you have other issues or things that are residual, keep on, give me a shout. We can set up another session. But most of my clients, as long as it's not fear or aggression or a complicated training matter, this one session does a lot of clients good. So call or text me if you have any questions, and watch the video on counter conditioning on the sound sensitivity. Make that list and pound through those one at a time until eventually Luca doesn't really care what the sounds are outside. He's just looking for somebody to give me a treat afterwards. All right, I'm David. This is Luca and Rio's Roadmap to Success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.